G'day, I'm Mark Hoth and welcome to Swift Almanac. In this iOS Essentials class, we're going to cover how to code auto layout. If you aren't using the storyboard to create views and controls, then you need to know how to code auto layout constraints for your in-code controls. Apple has also provided an in-code visual format, but I'll be leaving that for another lesson, but just be aware that it exists. So let's have a look at a number of cases so you know how to do auto layout in all circumstances. Okay, so we need to go into Xcode. I'm using Xcode 9.1 beta, the second beta, which is actually stable, and we're going to create a relatively stable anyway. We're going to create a single view app, and we're just going to call it Auto Layout Code. We're going to save it on the desktop. And we're going to go just straight to the storyboard. We're going to use the standard view controller, and we're just going to place 3 views on as soon as I find, there it is. So we've got 1, 2, 3. The first one I'm going to make red. The second one I am going to make yellow. And the third one I'm going to make green. So we've got a sort of traffic light effect. And what I want to do is I want to set this red one so that it is up in the top left-hand corner. So it's going to be up here somewhere. This yellow one I just want to center in the middle. And this green one I want to place maybe 50 pixels directly beneath or relative to this yellow position. So that's essentially what we're going to do. So that'll give you constraints going to the edge of the screen. It'll give you constraints centered, and it will give you constraints relative. So those are the 4 cases. So we just go straight to our view controller, and in view did load, we'll create a function called setUpConstraints, which I'll need to spell correctly. I need to spell correctly in both places. Okay, now, so we need to set up the constraints for our red view, our yellow view, and our green view. And if you don't already know, to define the constraints, you need to have exactly 4 constraints to cover all situations. And if you think about it, and we're using views, and you should also, okay, so just going back, so if you've got a view, if you've got any control, like a button, a label, a text edit, part of that it's a subclass of a view. So the view is sort of like the basic space where any control is going to exist, and that space is four-sided, a rectangle or a square, and that means that it has 2 defining points. It has a top left and a bottom right, and those 4 points mean that in order to have a fully defined auto layout or fully constrained item, you need 4 constraints. And sometimes that's not too intuitive, because sometimes you're placing the center, which isn't the top left or the bottom right. But if you place the center of something, then it still doesn't have a width or a height. So you just need to understand that you need 4 constraints. So what I do is I define what my constraints are going to be. So for the red view, we want it up in the top left-hand corner. So it's top and leading. And then we need height and width. For the yellow one, now we want that centered, so it's center X and center Y, and then it will need a height and a width. And our green view is going to be centered in the X coordinate because it's going directly below yellow, and it's going to be its top is going to be, say, 50 below yellow, and then we have a height and a width. Okay, so that gives us the 4 constraints that we need to code for each of these views or controls, whatever it is that you want to place on the screen. Now, if we go back to the main storyboard, if we create a constraint just here, you'll see that the constraints here belong to the view. They don't belong to the item. Okay. What we're going to do in our setup constraints is everything is relative to the view of our view controller. Okay, so the first one is let red top equal NSLayoutConstraint, and it's got a very long parameter list, and we need to put the item is the first one. Of course, what I've forgotten to do is create the outlet. So we'll just quickly create the outlets. We've got red view, yellow view, green view. Okay, so now that we've got our outlets, we can go back to filling in the first layout constraint. So, not surprisingly, for red, we're going to use the red view constraint. Now, the attribute we want to set here is the top, and we'll just go top, and related by is just going to be, it's going to be equals. It's related to the view, and the view attribute that it's related to is the top, and the multiplier is just going to be 1, and the constant is going to be, so how far from the top do we want? So we just want 16. Okay, so that gives us our first constraint, and then we just do the same with our leading height and width. So let red leading equals NSLayoutConstraint, red view dot leading related by dot equals to, it's related to the view, the attribute is leading, multiplier is 1, and the constant is 16. So we'll just run that and see what we come up. Oh, no, we won't. So we'll put in the height and the width. I'm getting ahead of myself. red view. Oh, we don't want to be running anything. Slow down. Oh. Dot height related by dot equals to nil, and you could see that was an optional because we're not relating the height to anything else. It's dot height multiplies 1 constant. We want the height to be, say, 50 pixels, and then we want the same for the width. I'm going to call this red width, and we'll give it a width of 200. So that gives us 4 constraints, and what we need to do is we need to add those constraints to the view. Add constraints, and as you can see, it takes an array of NS constraints. So we create an array and we just put in red top, red leading, red width, and red height. So we run that and we'll see what happens. Okay, and so nothing's happened. And the reason why nothing has happened is because what we need to say is this translate auto resizing mask into constraints has to be equal to false. And if we look here on the quick help, it says, note that the auto resizing mask constraints fully specifies the view size and position, therefore you cannot add additional constraints to modify the size and position without introducing conflicts. If you want to use auto layout, which we do, to dynamically calculate the size and position of your view, you must set this property to false. Okay, so if we run this again, having set that property to false, okay, so now we've got our red item where we want it, but there's this mini menu bar, or I'm not sure exactly what the official name for it is, which is causing us a problem. And the reason it's causing a problem, even though we've said dot top, we actually want it to be dot top margin, which is another one of the enumerated values, top margin. And that, if you're using Xcode 9, which you should be by now, that is going to give you the safe area, which is, I think, new to Xcode 9. I didn't see it in Xcode 8. So the safe area is just the area where you can, which is your screen to use. Now, why is that not working? The top margin, 16 it should be. Did I put it in the wrong spot? Right. Now we want our dot top to be equal to the views dot top margin. Okay. Oops. Should be right this time. There you go. So now we've got a 16 by 16 different like border between the top edge and, or the top viewable edge and the left or leading edge. So to do the yellow center Y, center X, we just do the same, follow the same procedure. Let yellow center X equal NSLayoutConstraint. The item this time is the yellow view. The attribute is dot center X related by dot equal to the view dot center X. The multiplier is 1 and the constant is 0 because we want to be in the exact center. And then we do the same with center Y. yellow view dot center Y is equal to our view dot it doesn't like something I'm doing anyway. And then we want the height and the width to be the same as these ones, so we'll just copy and paste those. And change this view here to the yellow view. And make this yellow height and yellow width. And then again, we need to go yellow view dot translate equals false. And then we add those constraints to the view. Yellow width, yellow height, yellow center X, yellow center Y, and we'll run that. And I've got some error here about, did you mean center? Maybe it's just that I'm it's very bizarre. Anyway, okay, so we've got our yellow one and it's now centered and it's got the right height and width. So that's all good. And so in our final view, we want to make this relative to the yellow one. So essentially what we're doing here is, instead of using this to item as being the super view, we're going to use it being this other sub view. So we just go let green center X, that we want that to be center X still. So green view dot center X related by dot equal. This one is going to be the view dot center X. The multiplier is still 1 and the constant is 0. Now this is the one where it's going to be relative. So it's going to be the green top green view dot top is going to be equal to, now the item is going to be the yellow view, and the attribute is going to be the bottom. The multiplier is still going to be 1, and the constant is going to be, say, we said 50 below, so we'll put 50. And then we're going to have a height and a width. And we'll make the width for this one 100, and we'll make the height 25, just make it a little bit smaller. So this is going to be the green height and the green width, and it's going to be the green view. And then we need to do these two things. So green view.translate auto resizing mask into constraints equals false. And the view.add constraints, we want to add the green width, the green height, the green center X, and the green top. And you might also realize that I am Australian and spell centre or slash English, and you, well, I'm Australian, but in real English, centre is spelled C-E-N-T-R-E, but in America it's spelled E-R, and so that's why sometimes there are some spelling differences or errors depending on your viewpoint. So there you go. We've got our smaller green space, and it's positioned relative to our yellow view rather than the super view behind it. So this is a very, even though there's a lot of parameters, it allows you to fully constrain encode your objects. Now I've been using outlets, but there's nothing to stop you writing something in code. And then setting constraints for this other view, or using a UI label or whatever it is. You can use that variable in this item field. It doesn't need to be an outlet. It can be something that you've created programmatically. So anyway, that's constraints. I hope it helps. Hopefully you are now clear on coding auto layout. If you have any questions about the tutorial, then please leave a comment below or hit me up on Twitter @SwiftAlmanac. Please subscribe to the channel, it's free, and check out our website at www.swiftalmanac.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.